Have you ever heard the phrase, "they just don't make them like they used to"? In context, this core sentence can mean a multitude of different ideas or things. On its surface, it's often a sentiment shared from an older generation to the next, showcasing a long-held belief that newer quality cannot hold a candle to the tried and true methods that have been proven throughout history. In the context of film, it's become an increasingly common sentiment among a small crowd of audience goers that modern-day cinema in general lacks severe substance in relation to its core thematic ideas or merit, citing that filmmakers and projects today never truly take risks or leaps of faith, instead falling into a creative category that could best be described as dull and muted in comparison. Usually, I would not be one to join in this sentiment, as I truly believe that there are several examples of film today alone that would dampen such a statement. Yet, I do find that in the context of one studio's filmography in particular, this is shockingly not far from the truth. And this concerns the projects of perhaps one of the most formidable names in animation and cinema history itself, Disney. Now, to say that Disney is a company that has had its own fair share of creative highs is an understatement. It's what the studio has been built upon from the very beginning. And within every project, the talented team showcases what true thematic and artistic mastery can look like within the medium. This has paved the way for countless timeless films over the years, which seamlessly transport audiences to another realm entirely and invite them to explore a setting and world completely different from our own. However, Disney films, no matter new or old, have a certain and specific connotation attached to them, which is that the lighthearted and airy atmospheres of these films lends itself to kid-friendly fare, where the whimsical stories and characters seem crafted for wholesome family entertainment. This has led many audience members to wonder aloud, has there ever been a time where Disney has branched out to tell a story that was a bit more mature than the other filmography samples? And surprisingly, this has happened time and time again throughout the studio's illustrious history. Whether due to a deep creative desire to push the boundaries in the animation medium and its storytelling capacity itself, or some experimental format unknown to many at the time, there has been many a time where the content of a Disney film has veered into territory that not only feels darker and more intense than their other works, but also carries a surprising weight to its thematic substance that is almost indescribable. Perhaps there is no film in Disney's filmography that exemplifies this quite as well as the 1996 film The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, in context, I never grew up watching this film in my childhood, whether because my parents knew about the content of the film itself, or my interests were more suited for the vibrant and more colorful works from the studio. Hunchback was an interesting film and how little interest or attachment I had to it throughout the formative years of my cinematic upbringing. In fact, it wasn't until a few years ago that I actually finally got the chance to check it out. By chance, I managed to find a list of every Disney animation film and was mentally checking them off one by one until I arrived at Hunchback and realized I'd never seen it. So as I pressed play on Disney Plus one evening, I could not have possibly expected the end product I received, which is something far more artistic and nuanced than anything else in Disney's animated filmography. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is, in essence, far different from anything else Disney has ever attempted in their studio's history. And perhaps that's why it works so well. Right from the beginning, the film wastes no time in transporting audiences into its oppressive and lyrical atmosphere, as faint Gregorian chants fill the air as the booming Alan Menken score soon takes over audiences' senses. It's in this moment that you, as an audience member, realize that Hunchback is a film that holds no punches back, rivaling some of the best works of the studio as a contemplative, meditative story of revenge, genocide, sin, religious oppression, and desire. You know, normal themes to be explored within the confines of children's media. In thematic scope and ambition alone, the film is individualistic and wholly original. Based on the original source material by Victor Hugo, it's an adaptation that adds a signature Disney flair to the novel's content, but with a twist. You see, there's a lot of elements within the film to admire purely from the standpoint of entertainment for kids. The songs from Menken and collaborator Stephen Schwartz, the humor sprinkled throughout the film, the talking gargoyle characters living with the titular character on the roof of the cathedral itself, all of these elements are surely pulled from Disney's works of the past, building off of the structures of success in a wholly unique way. Yet beyond this, Hunchback of Notre Dame is a film that takes creative risks, and the result is all the better for it. Upon first viewing, I was struck by how surprisingly mature and motivated the storytelling within the film actually was, branching out to convey a sense of grounded realism and a motivation that is not felt within other works of this caliber regardless of the studio. It's within this element of the film that true success lies, and what ultimately answers the sentiment that The Hunchback of Notre Dame is indeed a film that Disney could not make today. Within the opening scene alone, the groundwork is laid from this mentality. As audiences are transported to the setting of 1482 Paris, a Romani puppeteer named Kloppen tells viewers the story of how the bell ringer of the Notre Dame Cathedral came to be. A group of Romanian gypsies moving secretly within the confines of the city are ambushed by perhaps one of the greatest and most coldly chilling antagonists that Disney has ever created in the form of Judge Claude Frollo, the Minister of Justice for the city who shows no semblance of warmth or forgiveness. It's through Frollo himself that so many of the film's overt religious overtones and mature thematic content is broached alone. As Frollo seizes the disfigured infant from the gypsies and plans to send the child to the depths of the well to die a violent death, his hand is stayed by the local archdeacon of the cathedral, who pleads for the child's life. Utilizing the arsenal of religious oppression and supervision, the archdeacon places a deep fear inside Frollo in the form of his own guilt and sin. You see, one of the most fascinating character elements for Frollo as an antagonist in the film is that, for as cold-hearted and malicious as he is devout and faithful to the confines of Catholicism himself. In that moment, in the wake of his choice to drown the infant that will be named Quasimodo, he looks up to see the very walls of Notre Dame itself looking down at him, scolding and judging his very actions. This pent-up guilt and disdain forces Frollo to take in the infant, hiding him away in the bell tower of the cathedral and agreeing to raise him. Ultimately, however, this choice, as valiant as it seems, hides an ulterior character motive underneath the surface. As Quasimodo grows and yearns to experience life outside of the walls of the cathedral, we begin to understand that Quasimodo himself is a physical manifestation of the guilt and sin that Frollo feels in that pivotal moment. By hiding the boy within the top of a location where no one can view the result of his own actions, Frollo is, in essence, seeking to expunge his own shortcomings and remorse, although this will, in turn, lead to his own downfall. Religion in general is a prevalent theme that runs throughout the course of Hunchback as a film, standing as a menacing presence much like the physical cathedral in the film, and serving as a foil of sorts to explore each character's own morals and manifestations. As the presence of the Romanian gypsies grows on the city, audiences are introduced to Esmeralda, a woman who seeks to carve out an existence for herself and her people under the tyrannical rule of Frollo and his authoritarian government. Her interaction and introduction to Quasimodo as a character once again parallels Frollo's own religious shortcomings in such a visceral fashion. As Quasimodo escapes the tower and joins in the Festival of Fools, he is, at first, celebrated for his appearance, as the desperate crowd laud him in his quote mask in the spirit of the festivities. Frollo, however, who is ruling over the proceedings, is filled with remorse and shame at the sight of the boy, once again viewing the result of his actions and guilt in the open where he can no longer hide them away. However, after the crowd turns on Quasimodo and begins to humiliate and attack him, an interesting character viewpoint occurs when Quasimodo pleads for his help, only for his cries to fall upon the unfeeling ears and heart of Frollo himself. This sequence once again perfectly accentuates Frollo's own religious shame and how Quasimodo himself ties in this character arc. Unwilling to help the boy as he fights for his life, Frollo in this sequence further spurs on such hatred within a deep-set desire to once again expunge his own wrongdoing in the most cold-hearted way possible. As Frollo watches the crowd beat and harass Quasimodo, Frollo views such actions in the context of his own wicked heart, striking down his own wrongdoing in the process as he watches the crowd strike down Quasimodo as well. However, it is the arrival of Esmeralda herself, who finally helps Quasimodo and stands up to Frollo's tyrannical rule, that we finally see an element that begins to crack at Frollo's calm demeanor and conscience. Frollo, in essence, becomes obsessed with the idea of what Esmeralda actually stands for, as her own forceful demeanor pushes back against the very ideals that Frollo has worked and fought so hard to rule all of Paris with. Yet beyond this, Frollo begins to deal with a deep-set lust for Esmeralda that manifests in the most disturbing of ways possible. It's through this core dynamic between Esmeralda and Frollo that the core thematic material of Hunchback shines through with ease. You see, Frollo is ashamed by his lust and desire for Esmeralda, showcased in the stunningly animated and conveyed Hellfire sequence, which remains perhaps one of the greatest and most mature portions of Disney's animated film canon by far. In this song, Frollo pleads with a higher power to help him with his temptation, yet is distraught when his cries and prayers fall on deaf ears. His vengeance then turns towards eradicating Esmeralda, the object of his desire, once and for all. Frollo begins a genocide to wipe out the entirety of the Romani peoples from Paris, fueled by his hatred of one for the majority. And this is perhaps the greatest thematic purpose and intent of Frollo as a character within the film. You see, Frollo is a man and character who claims to use faith and religion for good purposes and fair treatment, but ultimately utilizes and defends the most heinous and selfish acts in the same name of said faith and devotion. I did not expect a Disney film of all things to explore religious persecution in the name of pure evil, but it's one of the elements I wholeheartedly respect about Hunchback as a film overall. Yet even beyond this context, this is not a film that falls into the same decided narrative traps or pitfalls of many films before it. Rather, Hunchback of Notre Dame is a project that carves its own path forward, utilizing vivid animation and stirring music to make such a clear-cut impact. You see this core difference especially in terms of characterization in the film, especially when examining the trio of Esmeralda, Quasimodo, and Phoebus, captain of the guard. At the beginning of the film, audiences are led to believe that Quasimodo and Esmeralda's friendship will begin to grow into something more. It's hinted at several times throughout the film, and even Quasimodo as a character yearns for that kind of connection or impact. impact within his own life. However, with the arrival of Phoebus, as a growing and kindling connection grows between him and Esmeralda, Quasimodo begins to grow distraught and saddened at the outcome. However, one of the reasons I wholeheartedly respect Hunchback as a film is because it takes a departure from the traditional narrative structure of leading man ends up with romantic interest to paint an ultimate character dynamic that feels natural and nuanced. Quasimodo's happy ending does not involve a romantic interest or dynamic with Esmeralda, and the film and character are both all the better for it. He instead wants to feel accepted, and he does. This goes the extra step in contextualizing and conveying Hunchback as a film that feels grounded with realistic stakes and ideas, which goes hand in hand with some of the religious imagery and context on display. Hunchback is a surprisingly profound film in terms of impact when it comes to its set exploration of the weaponization of religious hierarchies and the quiet nature that can be held in the smallest of moments in between. Take, for instance, the moment where Esmeralda, a Romanian gypsy, walks through the echoing halls of Notre Dame Cathedral, witnessing the devout and faithful as they cry out to a higher power with their woes and fears, as she tearfully pleads for that said power to help the outcasts in such a world that no longer feels love and devotion to anything. There's something so distinct and impactful about this thematic thread that ties the film together, imparting so much depth not just within the most sinister of moments where such a theme is exemplified, but also in the most profound and small moments in between where emotional weight and truth is stored in abundance. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is, in essence, a decidedly different film than anything we have seen from Disney either before or since its release, utilizing a dark and oppressive atmosphere and tone to explore its core concept of devotion and faith in the face of unwavering religious persecution. It's a movie that I've ultimately begun to respect more and more since my first viewing of it. If anything, The Hunchback of Notre Dame is further proof of the storytelling capacity that can be conveyed or housed within animated media, telling such a motivated story with unflinching resolve and care to its source material. It's hard to say whether we as audiences will ever see another film from Disney as mature or grounded in tone and execution as this one is, but for these reasons, The Hunchback of Notre Dame is an impressive standout from Disney's animated filmography that packs a narrative and artistic punch with ease, but also carries weight with what it has to say. Only, though, if audiences are willing to listen, just as they do to the ringing bells of Notre Dame in the film. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this review on my channel. If you're new around here and you like the content you see, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications. Also, leave comment suggestions down below for future video, essay, and review topics. With that being said, until next time, this is Mitchell signing off. Peace out.